Okay, welcome to Chapter 9. Chapter 9 starts us on our journey talking about middle childhood. So we are moving on from early childhood, sort of that 2 to 6 age group, and moving on to children who are a little bit older, ages 6 through 12. So we're going to talk about, in this chapter, physical and cognitive development. Now, so the first section we're going to talk about is section 9.1, growth patterns. Now, one of the things that contributes to obviously growth and growth patterns in middle childhood is nutrition. Your average 4 to 6-year-old needs anywhere from 1,400 to 1,800 calories a day, depending on their activity level. But if you bump that up a few years, 7 to 10-year-olds require about 2,000. So just in a few short years, they have quite a different caloric intake needs. Obviously, healthful. It's going to be good for them to eat fruits and veggies and chicken, fish, whole grains, and to limit their intakes of fats and sugars and starches. We do know that during this period, a child's body weight doubles, and they typically find at the end of this period their growth spurts. Now, if we look at boys and girls, some differences between their physical growth. We know that boys tend to be slightly heavier and taller than girls through the age of 9 or 10. They typically develop more muscle. And after about age 13 or 14, once they move more into adolescence, they have a growth spurt and start to grow taller and heavier, and will typically end up that way as adults. Girls have an adolescent growth spurt as well, but they usually, before that adolescent growth spurt, are going to often be taller and heavier than boys until adolescence. They're going to also then, as boys start to begin to develop more muscle, girls are going to start to develop more fat. Now you can see, if we look here, we can see some growth curves for height and weight for both boys and girls. If we look here, we have the boys, we have weight on the left-hand side and height on the right-hand side. This table is in your book. This is figure 9.1. You can see weight and height, depending on which chart you're looking at, on the right-hand or the left-hand column, and age on the bottom. And what we're really looking at, what we're interested in here in these growth curves, is that yellow bar, that middle childhood area, ages 6 to 12. And so you can see the differences between boys and girls, boys being in blue, girls being in red. While weight, the girls tend to outweigh the boys in middle childhood. Height tends to be relatively equal. Sometimes the girls and boys fluctuating back and forth, and then later on the boys outpacing the girls. Now, one thing we need to talk about when it comes to nutrition and growth in middle childhood is overweight children. In the U.S., between 16% and 25% of children and adolescents in the U.S. are considered overweight or obese, and more likely, if you're overweight as a child, you will become an overweight adult as well. Overweight kids face both physical and psychological issues. Often, overweight kids can be rejected by their peers, not always, but can be poor in sports, can often be treated as or be viewed as less attractive, although they're not, but can be, couched that way. So it can do a real number on a psyche, especially during these formative years. We do know they also are at a greater risk of health problems throughout their life, things like difficulty breathing and asthma, problems with joints, liver disease, acid reflux, things like that. Now, if we look here, this is another chart that's in your book, just to give you some perspective. This is looking at percentages of overweight children in the U.S. And if we look, this is broken down by different ethnic backgrounds. We have kids who are of Mexican American descent, African American descent, and European American descent. And we're looking here, we have two comparisons. One of this middle childhood area that we're looking at, ages 6 to 11 or 12, and then later on in life, ages 12 to 19. And you can see percentage-wise where boys and girls fall and where the different groups based on ethnic background fall, where obesity is the greatest and least. Some causes of being overweight, just like many other things we talk about in psychology, nature, nurture. Sometimes heredity contributes to that. Sometimes we are born to be heavier or born to be thinner. Sometimes we're born with a tendency to have a higher metabolism or have a slower metabolism. We also take our physical activity, those patterns, and we often learn them from our caregivers and our parents. So parents who have poor exercise habits, encourage overeating, keep unhealthful foods, may be more likely to have children who have poor exercise habits, encourage or overeat, and eat unhealthy food, and then are resultingly, as a result, overweight. We also know a more sedentary lifestyle is going to burn fewer calories, and those kids might be more likely to be overweight as well. And those are also things that can be learned.